Hello, I'm Jonathan Molker. Today is February 3rd, and this is the daily devotion for this Wednesday. So, I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about spiritual practices. Now, spiritual practices are the sort of exercises that you do for your soul. They're things like prayer, meditation, reading scripture, singing, ways that you keep yourself ready and able to hear God's voice when God speaks to you. And when I was speaking to my friend, I remembered a passage from the Bible that talks about this sense of readiness. It comes from Matthew 25. It's a story that Jesus tells, a parable that Jesus tells about being ready for the Lord. The kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. So this passage from Matthew, it reminds me of this idea of readiness. Are we keeping ourselves ready to hear God when God speaks to us? And I think a lot of times we aren't. We think we know when God's supposed to speak to us, whether it's Sunday or on Christmas or Easter. We think we know the specific times that God is supposed to speak to us, and we only make ourselves ready for those specific times. Now, of course, God can speak to us in these places, but God speaks to us at all different times. And keeping ourselves consistently ready to hear God's voice gives us a whole spiritual life, something that is complete, instead of something that we just plug into on the days where we think it's important. Now, this is not something that's easy to do in our culture, this idea of always remaining spiritually ready. We don't teach an idea of endurance and constant resilience in our culture. Instead, we're much more fans of burnout culture. We push ourselves to be ready for specific things and then to need to collapse afterwards. I think that's very prominent in a lot of the ways that we talk about work life, for example. In the United States, we often assume that you should work up until the amount where you can do absolutely no more. Instead, this idea that Jesus is presenting in this story is one of consistent readiness, something that we can maintain for a long time, reserve of oil for our spiritual lives, keeping ourselves ready. So what does all this mean? How are we supposed to keep ready? It's these same ideas of spiritual practices that I was talking about at the beginning of this devotion. Now, different people have different things that work well for them. And I don't know what's necessarily going to be the best thing for you. But anything that places you in a position where you are learning to listen, I think, is a great source of spiritual practice. That's why, for example, prayer is a wonderful way to prepare yourself like that. Because talking with God, of course, puts you in the position of being willing and ready to hear God's voice returning to you. All of this assumes taking time out of admittedly already very busy days. I don't think any of us end the day on a regular basis saying, gosh, I just had so much extra time. So we have to search for the time. We have to seek to maintain this balance in our lives that keeps us at a sense of spiritual readiness instead of spiritual burnout. To do that is to do as the wise bridesmaids do in Jesus' parable. It means that you are keeping a reserve of oil. You're keeping an extra flask, knowing that God's plans may not follow what you expect them to be. But no matter what they are, you are preparing yourself to be ready to hear and respond to God's voice.